Some general principles.
The meaning of Anglos has changed over the centuries. The name originates from the Angles, one of the Germanic peoples who settled in parts of the British Isles after the Romans evacuated around 450 AD. Anglo-Saxon became the collective term for these peoples, and also named their language with the term Anglo, transforming it into English. In Australia, the root word is retained in the term Anglo-Celtic, meaning the amalgam of English, Scottish, Welsh and Irish peoples, who constituted most of the white population from colonial times. In some countries, Anglo designates English-speaking white people. Thus, the meaning of Anglo has broadened, though perhaps less in the eyes of observers than among Anglos themselves. At the same time, the constituent identities remain, especially from the subjective perspective of those in the old country. A residue of past disputes remains in the memory of older Australians. Despite this history, the similarity of British Isles descended peoples is manifest. In this document, we adopt this broader meaning of Anglo. What does phobia mean? In psychology, a phobia is an extreme and involuntary fear reaction such as fear of heights or of being outdoors. The meaning includes the milder reaction of xenophobia, such as the aversion to strangers that begins at around 5 months in children. In politics, a broader meaning was in use by the early 20th century when Anglophobia designated hostility towards England or Britain. By late in the 20th century, the suffix phobia was being used to designate hostility towards many religious or sexual categories. Islamophobia, Judeophobia, homophobia, and transphobia are a few of the more common examples. Applications in the suffix continue to increase. Perhaps the earliest study of Anglophobia was by James Gwynne Cooke, an American author who in 1919 wrote a book titled Anglophobia, an analysis of anti-British prejudice in the United States. Cooke distinguished types of hostile reaction to Britain, all characterized, he thought, by ignorance or obsession with long-dead causes. This included Irish and German dislike of England. As early as the War of 1812, American Anglophobia emerged as fantasies about vast English conspiracies, though it was no fantasy when, in that year, the British Navy sailed up the Potomac River and burned Congress and the White House to the ground. Cooke's thesis that dislike of Britain originated in real or imagined conflict suggests why Anglophobia was widespread a century ago. At its height around 1900, the British Empire ruled almost a quarter of the world's land surface and traded with much of the remainder. This vast enterprise brought subject peoples and many others into contact with Anglo administrators, soldiers, missionaries, traders, and in what would become Anglosphere countries, settlers from Britain. In the present document, Anglophobia names something personal. It is the dislike or mistrust of British-descended people wherever they reside around the world, though mostly in Anglophone countries. The new meaning usually applies within, not between countries. Also, the word and the sentiments it describes cannot usually be applied to the past. For example, Americans of 1812 could not have been Anglophobic in the ethnic sense unless they hated themselves, a phenomenon yet to arrive. This raises a question. If Cooke was correct, then a degree of Anglophobia was understandable, if not excusable, a century ago at the height of the British Empire. It is not a straightforward matter to explain why Anglophobia became more common after the British dismantled their empire, and why it is frequently evident among leftist Anglos within English-speaking societies, which show relatively high levels of openness and tolerance. Though hostility towards Anglo ethnicity and culture has been increasing since the 1960s, the term Anglophobia is not in common usage. Neither is it recognized by the multicultural establishment, which does not classify Anglos as a protected group. Most multicultural scholarship treats Anglos as perpetrators. not victims of prejudice. This is unfair because Anglos have for many years been subjected to vilification on a large scale. Consider the mainstream Australian media. Over the period 2012 to 2013, the second author of this paper documented 215 articles and TV programs touching on ethnicity and the national question. These were found in leading Australian newspapers and popular television and radio programs. Topics included Aborigines, refugees, racism, multiculturalism and diversity, national identity, foreign investment, international relations, and overseas ethnic conflict. 20 of these articles and programs ethnically defamed Anglos or whites, accusing them of smugness, hypocrisy and racism, fraud, idiotic conversation, having a special problem with racism, of detracting from diversity, and in particular of being too numerous in boardrooms among university faculty and in television programs, and adhering to offensive commemorations such as Australia Day and Anzac Day. No other ethnicity was defamed. Many of these accusations came from high-status individuals, including a race discrimination commissioner, television personalities, newspaper columnists, a retired judge, Jermaine Greer, university professors, Aboriginal leaders, and a serving foreign minister. The sample also revealed the mainstream media's acceptance of this defamation. No space was provided for counter-views. The media were biased and unself-critical. Anglophobia continues to trickle and sometimes gush into public culture. Biased news reports, documentaries and commentaries push negative images of white Australians using prestigious platforms such as SBS television and the voices of selected academics. Government-mandated school curricula and rituals are systematically Anglophobic, as detailed later in the text. In our definition of Anglophobia, we recognize that it is one manifestation of psychological propensities that are universal to human beings. We do not maintain that Anglos are purely victims and other groups only perpetrators. We are all humans and therefore capable of aggression and unfairness. Nevertheless, Anglophobia deserves attention because it is common in the media and in the educational system. In fact, hatred of Anglos is a core feature of multicultural ideology in Anglosphere societies. Anglos are the only ethnicity denied full participation in multicultural politics because the system was developed in opposition to their interests. Even a simple declaration of Anglo or white identity is liable to be attacked. This is not true for any other ethnic identity. As already noted, multiculturalism has the appearance of cultural warfare designed to harm Anglos demographically, economically, and psychologically. This ideology and its associated practices should be exposed in plain language and repudiated.
This video has been proudly produced by the British Australian community.